make it all right. We got to brave the weather.
AFA Today on AFR Talk. It's Kevin McCullough. We're glad you're with us on this Monday. Thank you for, again, being patient with me as I'm coming to you from the West Coast today, not in my normal belly, the Beast location of Lower Manhattan. Got to see a young man, Top Gun graduate, over the weekend, wed his beloved, and some of the Navy traditions that went with that at the ceremony. That was really quite a something to see. I'll try to tell you about that before we're done today if I have time. But what we're dealing with right here at the beginning of this broadcast is a very serious issue, because I don't think that if you're running for president, you want to seriously attract the attention and the support of evangelicals and primarily pro-family voters, that you can play games with the issue. This is something we've seen from other people. I don't think it ever has benefited them. I often tell people I wish Mitt Romney had just had one chicken sandwich in the campaign cycle. If he'd just gone out on Chick-fil-A Day and eat a Chick-fil-A sandwich, you'd be surprised how much goodwill that might have carried. But when you start playing games with whether or not you're going to back the most important issues as it pertains to, I don't believe just the family values base. The issue of marriage and the structure of a family is the most important key component of how our civilization is constructed. And when you start saying, I'm not sure if I have to believe that in order to sway some votes, you know, there may be some gay campaign money out there somewhere that I might attract at some point if I just don't get too hardcore about it now. And I'm not saying Rand Paul is saying that. I'm saying I don't want him to be saying that. So I reached out to the senator's office. I saw what Steve Deace was talking about, decorated talk show host, soon-to-be published author, a number of other things, but very successful contributor now to the Washington Times as well. But here's the thing. I saw what Deace was Facebooking about. You should join his Facebook community if you haven't already, but do that. I thought that his questions were reasonable, so I reached out to the senator's office and I thought, well, at least they're gonna want to say to Kevin McCullough, yeah, we're going to be reasonable about this. Instead, what I got was a silly dismissal via email, sending me the same statement that they sent to Steve Deace. And I said, you avoided all answering of the question. Will Senator Rand Paul weigh in on whether or not the judges overstepped in the state of Kentucky's marriage amendment? Their desire to define marriage as a sole legal relationship between one man and one woman before God for a lifetime. That's important. Does Rand Paul believe it's important? That's what we're kind of getting to the bottom of. So, Steve, I'm not honestly that surprised that the campaign manager refused our invitation to come on. But in his absence, what do you have to say about the fact that I've given him a chance now to step up on one of the larger platforms that evangelicals use to vote with every year, and to just make simple what seemed confusing, and the fact that they've not only not taken up that opportunity, but tried to dismiss this issue with one or two kind of side remarks. What is your take on this? What's your intuition telling you?
Well, my intuition, it's making my spidey sense tingle, Kevin, because the way this whole issue has been debated since last June's anti-Christian polemic disguised as a Supreme Court opinion, it actually should have played to Rand Paul in his 2016 aspirations, because you'll note that the court didn't quite have the guts to stand up to the idea of overturning state marriage amendments on its head. They said that you didn't have the standing to defend it, but they didn't have the guts to step in, because that's rarefied air, even for an out-of-control judiciary to go into. And so he could have said, hey, this is another example of why fighting for this at the state level is the right way to go. Instead, he comes out the day of the ruling and praises Anthony Kennedy by name, who wrote just an anti-Christian screed I would expect to read at Think Progress, let alone in a Supreme Court opinion. He praised Anthony Kennedy for his reasonable opinion. I thought that was a huge mistake. I was with him in a meeting and a speech he had with over 600 pastors about a month after the Supreme Court opinion. He said nothing about the opinion. He said nothing about the threats to religious liberty that networks like AFR are covering on a daily basis that we have been seeing in light of this ruling now. And now we're sitting here where this is right in his own wheelhouse, right in his own backyard. With all due respect, and listen, I've got an ego like anybody else. I'd like to think maybe I can move and influence public policy. But the truth is, you should not need a phone call from Steve Deace to decide when you're going to speak up about 1.22 million of your own constituents being disenfranchised. I mean, that is ridiculous. On its face, it's ridiculous. And, I'll say this, his dad, I had several disagreements with his dad. His dad would have had no problem whatsoever confronting a judge who believes he has this kind of jurisdictional authority. In fact, I've had several Ron Paul activists in my own state sending me quotes from his dad about what should be done to judges that do stuff like this. And instead, we have to beg Rand Paul for a statement. It takes him 7 days to get one. And now it's going on 10 days. And still, what's the remedy? What's the action? Something tells me. Here's a simple question, Kevin. If the issue was a federal judge saying you could target 1.22 million Kentuckians with drone strikes, do you think it would take a week for Rand Paul to say something about it, Kevin?
No, not in the least.
No. And I think that's the issue here. Ultimately, you are informed and convicted to move on what your convictions actually are, period.
Right. Nope, that's totally the way it works. Okay, 888-589-8840. Steve Deace is with us, and I don't know how long you can stay, Steve. You're welcome to stay longer. I want to take calls, but I want to push people to do this. I still believe that one of the reasons that I am supposed to be doing what I do for a living is to help you understand the world around you, to help you react to it, respond to it, proactively engage it. And right now, I feel like we have some obfuscation going on. Right now, I feel like we have a senator who wants to be president, who is not who's not fulfilling his basic obligations, even to the people of his state. And my friends, we have good listeners in the state of the Commonwealth of Kentucky that are listening today, that understand that this is exactly the wrong thing to be doing by their senator. So what I'm going to beg of you and plead with you to do is, if you are listening to us today, because what senators do impacts more than just the people of their own state. Senators act on behalf of the states, but they really act on behalf of the collective of the American people, whereas the House of Representatives, it's very much your district, your person. So all of America that may be asked for his vote for president have the right to know if he's going to accurately address the issue of a federal judge overruling the will of the people in his state when he said this should be left for the states to decide. 202-224-3121. Now, I just want you to melt the phone lines. 202-224-3121. I want you to ask the staff of Rand Paul in Washington, D.C., and if they try to transfer you to the in-district office, take that number and call them as well. Call both places. But what you want to do is you want to ask them if Senator Paul does believe that judges should not overreach and abuse the will of the people, particularly the voters of the state of Kentucky, why hasn't he weighed in on this? When will he? Ask them the question, when will Senator Paul be making a statement to address the federal judge's overreach in this case? You don't get to be president. You don't get to run for president. You don't get to ask for the votes of the American people if you play games with them. That's just the way it should be. So today we're saying no game playing. Today we're saying we're not disrespectful. We just want to be very, very informed as to what he's thinking. 888-589-8840. If you call the office in Washington, then call me. I want to hear from you as to what they say. 888-589-8840. Steve Deace is with us. He's heard on many of these same stations in the evenings. 888-589-8840. But call Washington, D.C. first. Call the office of Rand Paul. 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. Now, let's go to the phones. Let's talk to John, line 3 from Florida, who wants to weigh in on this. Hi, John. Welcome. You're on with Kevin McCullough. So glad you're here.
Hey, Kevin. I thank Jesus for you taking my call.
Sure thing. What's your thoughts?
Well, I'd like to preface marriage, first off. I like for everybody to understand that when a person, when a man and a woman have a baby, then they're married, regardless of whether they go down to the courthouse where they get
John,
married.
this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, and I don't want to get off onto the intangibles. Talk to me about your feelings about Rand Paul and what he's doing right now.
Well, that's my feelings. That don't matter. The natural law is what matters.
Okay. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Let's go to line 1. Lynn in New Jersey. Hi, Lynn. Line 1. Lynn, are you there?
I'm here.
Glad you're with us. What's your thought on this?
So, guys, I want to say this nice, but haven't we learned yet if you have to force or shame Rand Paul by making all these calls to get him to say something, shouldn't that tell us something?
I will kick that to Mr. Dace. Dace, the fact that we're even the fact that we're even having this conversation already tells us a great deal, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's what I said earlier. I mean, if this was drones, would we have to wait 7 days for a remedy, for an action? I mean, we had a 13-hour filibuster, which a lot of us around the country that are listening and involved in this conversation rallied behind him on that moment. Whether we necessarily agreed with his entire application of that or not, we certainly agreed it's a bad idea for any president to have a secret kill list outside of the Fourth Amendment. So we have seen him act courageously with the courage of conviction on certain issues. So I think the caller from New Jersey has a point. Ultimately, you are what your record says you are, and you know a tree by its fruit. That's the fact that we even have to ask this question. I mean, and what worries me, too, is, at least if you were going to condescend pro-family voters, you would see this issue as an opportunity to do it. You'd blast out a press release before the Steve Daces of the world asked you about it, and just to show people with nothing more than words that you were on their side, even though you weren't going to actually do anything about it. And I think that the caller from New Jersey raises a very, very good point in that we shouldn't even have to have this conversation. How come it's always Ted Cruz and Mike Lee on every fight? If you notice that, Kevin, it doesn't matter what the issue is. They're the first two guys to charge the hill every single time across the board. They're in that first initial, retaking of ground. It's always the same couple of guys. And I think the American people, particularly patriots listening to this network, ought to take notice of that.
Good point. Lynn, did you have anything you want to add to that?
No, Kevin, I'm just saying, I think I made the point, but if you have everybody making these calls, and let's say he does issue a statement, what good is it? You had to beg for it. I mean, come on.
Right.
Let's find someone else.
Well, actually, Lynn, if I haven't found anybody yet, so I'm just speaking for myself. But if this point in the process is about eliminating people that we don't have to waste time eliminating later. So this could be a seminal moment for the senator, and he could say, "Yeah, this really is important, and I've handled this terribly." Or maybe he needs to fire a staffer who hasn't handled it properly. Maybe not even. And Steve, God forbid that this could be the case, but maybe his campaign staff not bringing your inquiry all the way to the senator's attention. Thinking it can be handled at a lower level because they're the smart consultant class in D.C. Those kind of animals do exist.
They do. I've unfortunately met a lot of them, and they don't let you put them in prison like they used to immediately. So, but I keep in mind, this is a guy who reached out to David Lane, who's as well known as any evangelical political activist in our movement. He took a trip with a bunch of Christian conservatives to Israel. He has spoken at a lot of David's events. He is not ignorant of our base. He is not ignorant of our issues. And I think that even if we're the most sinister motive about this is right, here's why it's still a productive exercise, because people deserve to know. Not everybody listens, unfortunately, to shows like you and I. And when the campaign ads start and guys start pretending they're something they're not, we can say, hey, we had this guy on record. We gave him a chance. He chose not to show up when it mattered the most. And this is how we hold them accountable for later on when the time comes.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Lynn, thanks for the call. And Steve, I don't know how long you can stay with us, but if I do lose you in the next little bit, thank you for being here as well. Let me take another call or two before our next break. Let's go to line 2, Patty in Alabama. Patty, you're on with Calvin McCullough and Steve Dace. Thanks for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank God for you. Thank God for Mr. Days. I did call the Senator Rand Paul's office. They were unable to give me an answer because the lines were busy. And I just left a message stating we need to hear from him, how he takes a stand on the definition of marriage between a man and a woman. But I'm grateful for what you do. So there, okay?
Thank you, Patty, for doing that. That little act of good citizenship, hopefully going to help us have some greater clarity in the days to come. Line 4, Patrick in Arkansas. Hi, Patrick. Welcome. Line 4, Patrick, are you there?
Yeah, we had a little hiss there. I almost lost you. You know, I'm not going to sit here and try to pass judgment on Rand Paul's Christianity. The only one thing I am going to say, and I've got several points I want to make, but one thing I wanted to say is that I noticed in interviews early on that his wife seemed to be more convicted as a Christian than possibly he was. Here's the other thing. It's amazing to me how every time someone looks like they're going to make it to a very high office in this land, they begin to compromise, thinking, I suppose, that they can get the support they need and quell the anti-support that may be coming in order to get elected, thinking, well, I'll change things once I get there. But that's not the way it works. What we're finding more and more is that those who come to the forefront and they don't compromise their values to try to get elected, they're the ones who end up getting elected. The other thing is that this is not necessarily just a Christian issue. It is a moral issue.
No, it's for the good and the welfare of the entirety of the free peoples of the globe. Thank you, Patrick. Sorry, we got to cut you off, but we got to go to break. I'm Kevin McCullough. He's Steve Deace. This is AFA Today on AFR Talk. We're taking your calls and asking you to call Washington, 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. Ask to be connected to Senator Rand Paul's office. And then ask him, why won't he respond to the issue of federal judges overturning the voters of Kentucky, his state in particular? Coming right